I'll call to order the September 2nd, 2014 City Council meeting and invite all of those wishing to join myself and the Council in the Pledge of Allegiance to please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we move to our first item of special business shown on your agenda, I'd like to welcome Emily Moon, our new Deputy City Administrator. I would just say that she impressed those on the various interview panels as an experienced leader in municipal government, and her dedication to innovation, strategic thinking, and continuous improvement, which mirror our leadership philosophy here at the City of Issaquah. The bulk of Emily's career has been dedicated to serving local communities and strengthening municipal organizations. She also brings experience from her work for a municipal league. She served as assistant town manager for the town of Windsor, Connecticut, where she oversaw half of the town's departments, and including everything from building safety, zoning, engineering, fire marshal, health services, information technology, the library, and I could go on and on. So we are indeed very, very fortunate to have Emily on board with us, and I would like to ask her to come forward and introduce herself briefly to each City Council member. So Emily, if you would. We're so fortunate to have you. Now to special business, Agenda Bill 6878. I have a proclamation announcing Diaper Need Awareness Week, and so I would invite the Executive Director of Eastside Baby Corner forward. Renee, how are you this evening?
Thank you.
A proclamation, whereas diaper need the condition of not having a sufficient supply of clean diapers to ensure that infants and toddlers are clean, healthy, and dry can adversely affect the health and welfare of infants, toddlers, and their families. And whereas national surveys report that 1 in 3 mothers experience diaper need at some time while their children are less than 3 years of age, and 48% of families delay changing a diaper to extend their supply. And whereas the average infant or toddler requires an average of 50 diaper changes per week over 3 years, and whereas diapers cannot be bought with food stamps or WIC vouchers, therefore obtaining a sufficient supply of diapers can cause economic hardship for families. And whereas a supply of diapers is generally an eligibility requirement for infants and toddlers to participate in child care programs and quality early education programs. And whereas the people of Issaquah recognize that addressing diaper need can lead to economic opportunity for the state's low-income families and can lead to improved health for families and their communities. And whereas Issaquah is proud to be home to various community organizations that recognize the importance of diapers in helping provide economic stability for families and distribute diapers to low-income families throughout various channels. Now, therefore, I, Fred Butler, Mayor of the City of Issaquah, do hereby proclaim the week of September 8th through September 14th to be Diaper Need Awareness Week in the city of Issaquah, and strongly urge all citizens to donate generously to diaper banks, diaper drives, and those organizations that distribute diapers to families in need to help alleviate diaper need in Issaquah and its environs. In witness whereof, I hereby set my hand and seal of the city of Issaquah this second day of September 2014, signed Fred Butler, Mayor. And so here is the proclamation, and I wish you every success in meeting the need and for a successful week in encouraging our citizens to donate to your cause.
Thank you very much, Fred.
Thanks for that.
So Fred, members of the City Council, members of the audience, thank you so much for your recognizing National Diaper Need Awareness Week this week through this proclamation. You may not know this, but Eastside Baby Corner is the only joint national diaper bank in the country. We partner with Westside Baby over in Seattle, which we are, through this partnership, able to distribute over 1 million diapers every year within King County. So we're thrilled that we can do that. But we need over 22 million diapers in order to help fulfill the needs throughout King County. So we're far, far away from meeting those needs, but we're glad that we're able to at least make a little dent. Now, many of you that have had children know how expensive it is to purchase diapers. They're very expensive. And as the proclamation states, low-income families feel this burden even more so, and it's more exemplified because food stamps do not allow them to purchase diapers. Neither do the WIC vouchers, so it's very unfortunate. But the fortunate thing is that Eastside Baby Corner is there as a safety net to help these agencies and help these families make sure that they do get this. Eastside Baby Corner is proud to have been here in Issaquah. We're going to be celebrating our 25th anniversary here in 2015, so we're very, very proud to be here. But we serve kids birth to age 12 all the way through East King County, so not just in Issaquah. But our impact in Issaquah, I did want to share with you, is that we in 2013 served children with $450,000 worth of goods. That's a lot of goods that we have given to families in need just here in Issaquah. To give you an idea of our whole service area on the East King County area, we gave out over $4.5 million worth of goods, and we're going to be approaching $5 million this year in 2014. So we're excited, and I say this wearing two hats. I'm a resident here in Issaquah, and I'm privileged to be the executive director for Eastside Baby Corner and to help our neighbors here. So thank you again for helping us recognize National Diaper Need Awareness Week for next week through this proclamation. Thank you.
And thank you. Moving now to audience comments. Just briefly, guidelines for public participation. Citizens' comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and factor them into the decisions we make. Anyone from the public who wishes to comment will have the opportunity to do so. When recognized, please move to the lectern and speak into the microphone. State your name, address, and relationship to the city, i.e. resident, property owner, business owner, or whatever. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes, and if you have written comments, you can submit those to the city clerk. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. If a speaker is out of order, the mayor will direct the speaker to return to his or her seat. If the speaker does not comply, the mayor will ask him or her to leave the council chambers. Again, citizens' comments, written and verbal, are an important aspect of the public process. We take those comments seriously, and we thank members of the public for taking the time to address us during our meetings. And with that, I would ask, has anyone signed up to speak this evening?
Yes, we have one person who's signed up. It's David Kapler.
Good evening, David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. I certainly support the annexation of the state park by the city and hope that can be worked out. I'm a little frustrated on the zoning issue, mostly because you've got big parcels Some could be potentially have significant development, some could be recreation, and some, like the Heron Rookery and some other parts of there, or the ever-changing creek, really need to be in more of an open space type of zoning. But to go back and really get all that zoning figured out would be difficult, and the map keeps changing because the creek doesn't want to stay in its place. That's one of the neat parts about the park, is that you really see the dynamic Issaquah Creek. You can tell it used to be over some places in the past, and you can see it's trying to get somewhere else presently. But I think we need to go ahead. I don't want to be having the state park to come up with a project and have to go through a rezone project. But I think as our comprehensive plan work, we might want to consider some kind of special new zoning for the state park, that more of a performance zoning that ties in perhaps to some of the adopted plans for the state park. The other agenda bill related to Lake Sammamish State Park, it had some good things in it. Police, the rangers, many of them now are armed, but the law enforcement part of their job is not supposed to be a major part of their job, and their training and all of that is a lot less than, in terms of use of firearms and use of force, a lot less than our own officers. But I hope there will be a lot of working together, communicating, and joint training if we're going to be responding to incidents at the state park. Lifeguards would be a huge benefit to the park, not only but would increase attendance for sure, swimmer safety, but their eyes and ears that kind of keep an eye on things in a park, and would be really great to head off, or at least call attention to potential problems. Dispatch issue, I know we need to work that out with the police and state patrol and all, but that's certainly important. Just that coordination with our officers, again, with the police, and how we deal with dispatch, and being able to make immediate response if necessary to the park, and not getting, going to state patrol, taking its time to get to his car, whatever. It just really needs to be a chance for the additional officers, whoever they are or from, to get to the park as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
No one else is listed.
Is there anyone else in the audience desiring to speak this evening? Yes, sir.
My name is Ken Eastman. I am a resident of the city of Issaquah in the Tallis neighborhood, and I wanted to talk about development this evening. Seems to me there's good development and that serves the public good, and there's development that may not. I would like to comment about development or future development in the Tallis neighborhood. Development that serves the public good is limited impact, may potentially increase the tax base or provide services. But I believe that further development beyond parcels 7, 8, and 9, specifically the annexation of the 49.2 acres of Royal King County, is not in the best interest of the public, and it's not in the best interest of the Tallis residents. I can tell you that the development of 7, 8, and 9 has started. It's about a month in, and it's been a miserable summer for us. There are trucks running up and down that hill, taking 20,000 cubic yards of topsoil off that mountain, going down Shangri-La Way and going down Tallis Drive. There are about 700 homes that those trucks have to go past that are within a stone's throw of that noise as they roar up and down that hill, and the friction braking, and now the city has allowed compression braking in our neighborhood because of safety issues. That's 1,333 truckloads of topsoil that have to come out of there. That's just to scrape that hill and start the roads that will be under construction for another year. We are impacted by the traffic, we're impacted by the dust and now the mud, and the noise has been just incredible all summer long. I really want to talk about the 49.2 acres behind. I would agree the ship has sailed on parcels 7, 8, and 9, but we have gotten a taste for what that annexation would probably yield in terms of the impact to our quality of life in our neighborhoods. I just would respectfully ask the City Council, if and when that comes up, please ask yourself, what would be the impact of the community? The fact that all of that construction, noise, traffic, and impact has to come through the middle of our community. There is no other way up to the top of that hill but to go through the center of the Tallis community. So once again, I would respectfully ask that you consider that if and when that annexation comes up for vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the audience desiring to speak this evening? Anyone? Ms. Marsh.
Hi, my name's Connie Marsh, and I have a shop at 1175 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, Suite B11, and also live in Issaquah. So, annexation of the state park, the zoning is better than what it started out at, but one thing that did come up in the meeting was we don't seem to have the appropriate flexibility in zoning for our community facilities that we need. And this came up a few years ago in that we have a lot of zoning that doesn't seem to fit our new vision of Issaquah in some of our areas. So we really need to start looking at the rest of our codes as we start changing the style of our city to make sure that we have the tools that we need to do it correctly, because I don't think that we do. And I realize that adds another complexity, but we want, yet again, I say it all the time, an awesome city, not a city where we're just trying to cram it into our old code and we come up with varied results. The memorandum of understanding seems a little simplistic to me. There's a lot of component parts of annexing the state park that I think are missing in that. And part of that came to mind when I was dealing with Land and Shore. This city doesn't know very much, and especially the citizens, about the intent of Lake Sammamish State Park and what it is supposed to be and what the plans are. So I would also add a cooperative community education about what the citizens should expect from the state park planning and what is online already. So a little video for Channel 21, something in a power bill talking about it if we actually annex the park, welcome to the neighborhood state parks, and help everyone understand what we're trying to do and what is sort of allowed and not allowed in the state park. Because I think that is a tool that's totally missing, and I would like to actually see that in the memorandum of understanding to make sure it happens. And then on a different topic than the state park, though it certainly is going to edge the state park, is the Costco development agreement, which I'm going to do this from maybe the 100,000 foot level today. I don't think that the Costco development agreement fits our central Issaquah plan visions, and that's not even getting into the design standards. But if you go into the central Issaquah plan itself with the visions, and then you look at the Costco development agreement, they are very far apart, and we are twisting ourselves to somehow accommodate Costco's needs. Now, I realize that they're huge, and it's a big important thing, but we did the same thing before with Microsoft, and it didn't succeed. I think it is more important to preserve the integrity of our town and the soul of our town, and what we spent, $1 million in planning, the Central Issaquah plan, than it is to bend so willingly because one person with lots of money, one group with lots of money, wants something to happen. I would hope that you would look at this and think, how do I protect my community? not just what can we do for Costco, because in the end, it's our town and we want it awesome. Yet again, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else desiring to speak this evening under audience comments? Anyone else desiring to speak? Third and final call. Anyone else desiring to speak under audience comments? Seeing none, then audience comments are closed, and we'll move now to committee and regional reports, beginning with Councilmember Milligan.
I have no report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Pauley.
No report?
Councilmember Martz.
The Council Land and Shore Committee will meet Tuesday, September 9th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. Agenda is still being developed. And Sound Cities Association PIC will meet Wednesday, September 10th, the next day at 7 p.m. in Renton City Hall. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Scher.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to members of the viewing public. The Council Infrastructure Committee will meet tomorrow night at 5 o'clock p.m. in the Pickering Room of City Hall Northwest. That was a delay in our normal meeting date and time, unscheduled delay, and so we were supposed to have met a couple weeks ago, but due to unforeseen circumstances, we've moved it to tomorrow night. On the scheduled agenda is Agenda Bill 6780, which relates to the Costco Corporate Headquarters Proposed Development Agreement. We will also be looking at Agenda Bill 6843, making a recommendation on the Food Packaging Ordinance Amendments and Business On-Site Technical Assistance Funding. The committee will make a recommendation on Agenda Bill 6872, which is the third amendment to the agreement with the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District concerning a interties and a tank lease. And then we'll kick off some brainstorming relating to innovative traffic solutions around our community. The meeting is expected to last until about 6:30, but that feels somewhat conservative with the items we have on the agenda, so might be a couple hours. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mayor. Services and Safety Committee will be meeting on Thursday, September 4th, 5 p.m. in the Eagle Room. There's 3 items before us that evening. The first is 6885, Lake Sammamish State Park Memorandum of Understanding with Washington State Parks Department. 6710, Lodging Tax Advisory Committee membership and criteria. And we'll have an update from Economic Development looking at 3 things: Economic Strategic Plan, our Commercial Power, and Tourism Plan. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
I have no report.
Council President Winterstein.
Thank you. I have no report.
For the mayor's report this evening, there will not be an executive session this evening. Issaquah's part-time preschool for 3 to 5-year-olds has openings. In addition, a new pre-K class is now forming for 4 and 5-year-olds. Classes are offered at the Issaquah Community Center and Memorial Park Center, both in downtown Issaquah. For more information, visit issaquahwa.gov/preschool. A reminder to drivers, the speed cameras along 2nd Avenue Southeast will be reactivated tomorrow, Wednesday, September the 3rd, in conjunction with the first day of school to increase safety and reduce speed violations near several of Issaquah's schools. The cameras only operate during school days from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can learn more by going to issaquahwa.gov/speed cameras. Don't forget that it's salmon season. It's your annual opportunity to spot Chinook, coho, and other salmon species in the Issaquah Creek and local waterways. For more information on locations, such as the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery, visit the Friends of the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery's website at issaquahfish.org. Explore the historic downtown and step into our past on Saturday, September the 6th, during the Issaquah History Museum's Autumn Downtown History Walk. Check in at the Issaquah Depot Museum, 78 1st Avenue Northeast, 5 minutes before the 11 a.m. guided tour. Or you can call 425-392-3600. 3500 for more information. The men's 4-on-4 basketball season begins September the 18th. All participants must be 35 years or older. Teams will be accepted on a first-come, first-served basis, and space is limited. To register, call 425-837-3300. On September the 9th, from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. in the Pickering Barn, we will be hosting a Salmon Day volunteer sign-up party. If you're interested in learning more about helping out at our yearly festival, please join us at that sign-up party. Salmon Days would not be possible without the dedicated efforts of hundreds of volunteers. You can learn more at salmondays.org. And finally, Friday, September the 5th is your last chance to enjoy Issaquah's summertime art walk on the streets of Old Town. The event starts at 6 p.m. for visitors to watch artists in action, participate in creative activities, listen to live music, shop, and dine. And that concludes the mayor's report for this evening. Moving now to the consent calendar, there's been a request to move Agenda Bill 6856, Issaquah Highlands Shared Stormwater Agreement, down to regular business. So we will move that down to item number 8D under regular business. And with that, I would ask if the accounts payable and payroll have been reviewed.
They have.
Yes, they have.
Thank you. And what is your desire with respect to the consent calendar as amended? Council President Winterstein.
I move that we approve the consent calendar as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously. Moving now to regular business. Our first item under regular business is Agenda Bill 6866, Human Services Campus Support. That is coming back to the full council from Services and Safety. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mayor. Just as a quick background, I've got some information here, and then David Fujimoto is also here with us this evening to help us further. So in 2008, the city redirected $1 million that it had received from one of our local developers, and it was specified for the development of a human service campus. In 2009, they used $3,500 of that to conduct a feasibility study that was connected with Together Center. 2011, the findings of the study presented to the council that showed the creation of a human service campus was feasible. And again in 2011, the council approved Resolution 2011-03, resolving that the city maintain in reserve the accounts of $965,000 for the creation of a human service campus, and funding was set aside for 2 years. In 2013, Together Center and At Work entered into a letter of interest to explore the feasibility of developing a human services campus at this time at the At Work's location. And then in June of 2014, Together Center came together with a letter agreement on the joint project. So the agenda bill we have before us this evening is proposed to confirm support for the Human Service Campus as proposed by the Together Center and extend the time frame for reservations of the funding for the Human Service Campus. In addition, the agenda bill provides direction to begin preparing a third-party agreement between the city, At Work, and Together Center for the development of a Human Service Campus in Issaquah at the At Work location. So I'll make the motion, and then we can have David help us out with some further, and then some questions. So I'd like to move this evening to approve Resolution 2014-15, declaring continued support for a human service campus in the city of Issaquah.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. David, are you going to provide additional information before we open it for discussion and questions?
I can certainly provide some additional information. This slide, I think, essentially captures all the salient points that Councilmember Barber just iterated. The other piece that the committee had asked for was an update, and so after, at your pleasure, we can, Pam Mauk from the Together Center Executive Director is also here to provide a brief update on the status of the work as well.
So, questions or discussion? Or would, I think it probably would be more appropriate for the brief update on where we are and any additional information before we open it up for discussion.
That sounds great. So I will turn over the mic then to Pam Mauk, who's the Executive Director of the Together Center, who is one of the parties who's been leading the effort, along with others, to develop the Human Services Campus in Issaquah.
Great, thanks. And I move
Oh,
this
excuse me.
forward, I'm sorry, I move this forward with just there?
Just hit the down button.
Okay, great. Well, nice to see you all. Thanks for having me here. Again, I'm Pam Mauk, Executive Director of Together Center. One moment. Got some crib notes here. So Together Center, the City of Issaquah, and Issaquah volunteers, as you've heard, we've been working for a number of years to replicate Together Center Human Service Campus in Issaquah. We launched the Together Center campus in Redmond in 1990. 4 agencies did so, and they knew that when people need help, they typically need the help of more than one organization. Low-income people in particular have difficulty getting to services, but all of us need easy access to help when we need it, whatever our income level. Today we've got 20 nonprofit agencies on our campus with health, housing, financial aid, mental health services, and a whole lot more, serving 37,000 people from throughout the area, including Issaquah. In addition, at our front door, we have visitors are assisted with information and referral, help with language barriers, advocates for special needs like a veteran service officer, help for homeless youth, and a lot more. So who gets helped? People get helped. Of those that track income on our campus, the agencies that track people by income say 60% of those coming to our campus are low income or very low income. In addition, they have a multitude of vulnerabilities, financial, socially, health-wise, barriers. 40% of those tapping the medical clinic on campus speak a language other than English at home. So who gets help? Agencies get help. Our model is unusual. We have low lease rates, but the majority of our income comes from lease rates. The agencies saved over $250,000 in lease rates alone last year by being on our campus. So who gets help? The community gets help. Police departments, faith communities, schools all refer people to our campus. And we've been told by police officers in particular that when people need help, you need to get help right now, and you want to send people to a place where they have a high likelihood of having services available. So that's one of our benefits. So why a campus in Issaquah? Well, we've been looking at the Issaquah community, and as you heard, we did a feasibility study and a stakeholder study as well as community needs study. And the result was that there's a significant need for more services here in Issaquah, and there was a sense that the human services infrastructure is ad hoc. There's no kind of home base, or that the idea of a one-stop place for services was just much needed. With the rising population and the high degree of that's an odd way to put it, a huge loss of funding from government. The needs have just grown, and our model for providing services is sustainable, it's efficient, and provides a way for people to know they can come in and talk to somebody face-to-face and have multiple programs available. We've had about a dozen agencies that have maintained an interest in being involved, and we really appreciate the city has prioritized this campus. So how we got here, I won't go through all this, just in general. Broadly, we studied the needs, we studied the feasibility of it with the city and other experts. We struggled to find a good fit with property, and that's where we've really had hurdles that have lengthened our time frame to get this done. But we're now very pleased to have identified a great partner in At Work and a great location in the city-owned property there. So we spent, as I mentioned, we spent several years looking at a variety of properties. We used the feasibility study, which you funded, as a guide to location, costs, and benefits. And 3 properties we looked at very closely, and many more were explored with real estate brokers and other advisors. And At Work site is really our best opportunity. It has many of the amenities which were identified in the feasibility study: location, transit availability, visibility, size possibilities, and a lot of flexibility. So we're at a very exciting juncture, and we'd like to ask you to extend the resolution of support, and we look forward to working with At Work and the city to move the project forward. And we're tremendously grateful for your support and partnership. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. With that, questions or discussion?
I have one question.
Councilmember Winterstein?
All right, thank you. So, just a comment. Very pleased to see the progress that's been made over the last 6 or 9 months. I know that those who have been involved have really put a lot of their heart and soul into this. It's taken a lot of patience and perseverance, and I was very pleased to see this collaboration develop, with At Work. And I'm hopeful that this motion that's in front of us tonight, by extending this for another year, I mean, the earmark of the funds is, sufficient time, within the next year. I don't know whether or not we'll be back asking for a little bit more time or not. Who knows? I mean, but I'm hopeful that, with this in place, I believe that our city will negotiate in very good faith to reach a amenable three-party agreement, and I'll obviously be watching that closely as well, and look forward to seeing that hopefully in the near term. So thanks for your good work up to this point, and good luck moving forward.
Other questions or comments? Are you ready to act on the motion? All those in favor of approving resolution number 2014-15, declaring continued support for a human services campus in the city of Issaquah, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously. Moving now to Agenda Bill 6802, intent to proceed with annexation of Lake Sammamish State Park and setting annexation boundaries. This is coming back from Land and Shore. Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City and the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission have expressed interest in jointly pursue annexation of those portions of Lake Sammamish State Park currently in unincorporated King County to the City of Issaquah. Some portions, such as the Hans Jensen Youth Group camping area, are already in the city limits. The proposed resolution, Exhibit A, authorizes the administration to continue the annexation process with the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission. The resolution describes the boundaries of the annexation area, states the annexation area will assume its proportional share of the city's indebtedness existing as of the effective date, and sets the expectation for comparable zoning as allowed by RCW 35A.14.120, Exhibit B. Comparable zoning for the remainder of the state park is expected to be community facilities, CFF, that recognizes existing structures and high traffic use, and community facilities recreation, CFR, that recognizes outdoor recreation uses, Exhibit C. The Council Land and Shore Committee met on August 12, 2014 to review Agenda Bill 6802. The committee discussed zoning options for the state park. Staff specified the protection of the critical areas and associated wetlands through the Shoreline Master Program and critical area regulations would be the same no matter which zones are chosen. State Park Planner Nikki Fields outlined State Parks Commission adopted plans. An Area Classification and Management Plan, CAMP, for Lake Sammamish State Park in 2004, classification map shared with the Commission, which is Exhibit D, Lake Sammamish State Park Redevelopment and Restoration Concept Plan, which was in 2007. Following discussion and public comment, the majority of the committee recommended the resolution provide options for state park redevelopment. Fields confirmed these recommendations as acceptable due to consistency with adopted state park plans and camp map. The resolution has been updated to include, and then it has the specifics of the zoning by property number, which I won't attempt to read out, but is contained in the bill. The committee recognized that the adopted state plans will guide appropriate development and asked that the plans be referenced in the interlocal agreement to document this direction. Staff was asked to research zoning and permitted uses by similar parks in the region, including Renton's Jean Coulon Park and Marymore Park, to see if they can provide guidance on appropriate zoning. This information is provided in Exhibit E. The committee recommended approval of the proposed resolution and requested this item be placed under regular business of the September 2nd, 2014 council meeting. Therefore, I move to approve resolution number
2014-16.
accepting the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission's notice of intent to petition for annexation for the area known as the Lake Sammamish State Park, providing for the assumption of indebtedness and payment of taxes, establishing zoning for the property to be annexed, and authorizing the mayor to submit a notice of intent to annex to the Washington State Boundary Review Board of King County.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilmember Winterstein.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Butler, and thank you for that introduction. There was a reference in some of your comments tonight about members from the State Parks Commission being present at the committee meeting a while back. And as I considered this resolution and this bill in front of us, I realized that I think there'd be a lot of benefit to the public in general if we had the opportunity to hear some more from the people from the state parks. I know we have a number of representatives here, and if you, yeah, the lights. If you have the, would it be possible for you to come to the microphone and introduce yourselves?
We actually have three people here, and I hope Rich is not going to be shy. He's our park manager for Lake Sammamish State Park.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us here. I think this is, if there's specific questions I can answer, that's great, and otherwise I can rattle off a little bit about why it is that we want to be annexed, if that's helpful.
Yeah, could you first introduce yourselves,
Okay.
so for the general public?
My name is Peter Herzog, and I'm the Assistant Director of Washington State Parks, and with me is Nikki Fields. She's our land use and physical planner for works in my department, and Rich Benson is with us, who's our park manager for Lake Sammamish State Park.
Okay.
I think regarding the question of why it is that we would seek annexation, I think one of the critical things that happened to us, state parks, in the past now pushing 3-4 years is a dramatic reduction in our funding through the state general fund. And this has caused us to embark on a transformation, we call it our agency transformation, which really focuses on partnerships as the primary element to our survival, along with user fees and Discover Pass and more enterprise kinds of activities. But really reaching out and beyond ourselves and developing partnerships with other government and nonprofits and the volunteer community is really essential to operating of a state park these days. So we look around the park now and we see that we're this tiny little island of King County right in the middle of Issaquah, and we see our main partnership base is coming from the city and the organizations that are home here. So we would like to formalize that relationship with the city in a way that really acknowledges the partnership that we've had all along now for the past, now pushing 12 years of working together. And I really am amazed because we're practically on a first name basis with most of your staff, and so really this is a formalizing of that partnership. There's wonderful things that we're doing with lifeguards, potential of providing them, exploring private partnerships with your economic development folks, and policing, the great partnership that we've had there. The other 2 or 3 reasons, we would like to have a greater focus from the Development Services Division, your permitting folks, because we have now just invested somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 or $5 million in additional development at the park, and hope to invest more, and really streamlining that process and coming to a solid understanding with your development folks, with your permitting folks, is going to be really helpful, and providing that focus. The city can provide that focus that the county just in its larger scope can't provide us. We talked about unifying the underlying jurisdiction. We have pieces of the park that are in Issaquah, incorporated in Issaquah, and some that are not, and just unifying that so we're always talking with the same folks is going to be helpful to us. And finally, there's all of that potential that we haven't even thought about yet. The future is a long time. There are things that ideas for partnerships and working with the city on cooperation and public service that we haven't thought of yet, that if you just start going down that path, ideas start to gel about ways that we can work together and share resources and really improve the public service to the folks who are visiting the park as well as the Issaquah community.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that thorough opening comments. One thing I was wondering was, you probably have some sense. I know I like what you just said. The future is a long time, but you probably have some sense of if for the state park to truly be a viable long-term entity. I mean, what in your sense, what needs to happen to help assure that?
Like I said, we're doing our transformation strategy, and we've actually started applying it here at Lake Sammamish. I mean, it's basically 4 things, 4 kinds of support. It's doing a better job of business activities, being more entrepreneurial. It's doing a better job of bringing together volunteers and philanthropic support. It's doing a better job of partnerships with other government and other organizations. And then also lifting, working together to make the case to the legislature of the importance of the park to people, and the park system to the people of the state of Washington. So that's a political advocacy piece of it. So those 4 things really are what can help elevate this park and the broader state park system.
Great, thanks. I assume you've also had the opportunity to see our agenda bill, what's in front of the council this evening, and a key part of that is our proposed zoning. Now, when the bill was in front of this council a couple of weeks back, at that time the zoning was what we call community facilities recreational throughout community facilities for all of the parcels within the park. We had a conversation here, and then we kicked the bill over to the committee, and the committee had a great conversation. I understand that Nikki supported that as well, and now it's back in front of us tonight. And now 3 of the parcels now have been changed as far as what's in the bill compared to what we saw at first time. Now they're community facilities recreation, and 1 parcel where the primary development is there now, it still retains that community facility zoning proposal that's in front of us. And there's the drainage ditch small little parcel as well that has the CFF designation as well. So my question is, how well do you understand these zoning designations that we're considering, and can you explain to me how your vision and your hope for the park, as you just mentioned so eloquently a moment ago, on how well, because these define kind of potential land uses, these zonings. I'm very curious on how well your hope for a long-term viable park, and all of those 4 points that you mentioned, how well these zonings work or support that vision.
Okay, I'll just answer generally and then ask Nikki to answer that question. But I think, from a planning standpoint, the park is really it's not rocket science. There's fill and developable space, and there's wetlands and not developable space. And our plans up to this point have sort of acknowledged that and have left that general premise in place. And so we don't expect to be doing dramatic modification of the landscape. And so what is and what will be are relatively the same footprint. And so with that, I'll ask Nick to answer.
So I wouldn't say I'm an expert at the zoning, but I have read them over a number of times. And I'll go back to saying that the state parks went through a planning process to develop our own classifications, which are something like zoning. Within the park, you have a map that shows that. It's the one with the blue and the pink colors on it. And when we went through that, we decided which areas of the park were suitable for more developed recreation. Those are the recreation areas, or the pink areas on that map. And those you'll see coincide with the areas that we are, for the most part, looking at for community facilities. And that would allow some of the potential uses that we're thinking about to bring more people into the park to happen. So food services, potentially a restaurant. We've been talking about meeting rooms, a confluence center that would have meeting space and interpretive space, and a regional trailhead facility there all in one place. So that's where those are. The rest of the park with the community facilities recreation, most of those areas, State Parks actually is intending to not develop very much. It's primarily trails, other than the soccer fields area, which that use is allowed in the community facilities recreation. So in fact, our own classifications tend to be more stringent than even the community facilities recreation for the most part.
Okay, so I appreciate that very much. I mean, the state is the owner of the land. You operate the park. And this petition to be annexed into Issaquah would really practically, I think, Peter, you already mentioned, we become the controlling jurisdiction. You'd work with us on permitting, and you mentioned some other kind of longer term goals. So I think it's very helpful. I appreciate you being here and at least answering my questions. Maybe my colleagues have more, but what I just heard was really representatives of the owners of the land and your vision for the land and your understanding of what we're considering tonight and how well. And can you just give me a few statements on, well, I think Nikki already did that, especially with the zoning, that as proposed, that you feel that this meshes well with your vision and hopes as owners of the land, with your vision.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember Martz.
Could you elaborate on, I thought I heard you say that your own zoning is generally more restrictive than CFR? Is that what you said?
It is. The trouble, I think, is that the parcel lines and the landscape lines don't really line up. So, for example, there's a portion of the park that is where the heron rookery is, for example. That area, State Parks has classified most of that as natural, and the rest of it is resource recreation. And both of those classifications are more restrictive than your community facilities recreation. However, there's a little portion of the parcel that is mostly in that is also at Sunset Beach, which is a more intense level of development. So community facilities recreation, it makes sense for that portion of that parcel, while the rest of it could theoretically be more restrictive.
So I just want to be clear, CFR would be acceptable in that region?
It certainly would.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Councilmember Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to thank the Land and Shore for taking care of this and responding to a lot of the questions that we had during a city council meeting. I'm happy with the work that you've brought back. And while you brought it up, I wanted to give a shout out to the Friends of Lake Sammamish, who have been just a wonderful drumbeat, constantly reaching out to the community and engaging us and keeping us up to date with what's going on at Lake Sammamish. I really appreciate all the work that they've been doing. And I just had one question. It's along this same theme, so help me understand a little better. I don't know if this is for you or who this is for about critical areas. And this is not on our critical areas map. And so if we annexed it, then we would have critical areas designation in this land, right, that would interact with the zoning, if I'm understanding that correctly. And responding to the concerns of having parts of it designated as open space, but there is going to be a significant part that's designated as critical areas. Is that not correct? Who can speak to that?
Trish, do you want to come to the microphone and address that question, please?
They would be critical areas just by virtue of the creek that's there and the shoreline master program that are on the site. It would be King County Shoreline Master Program until we can go through an amendment process for that. But it would right now it's under King County's critical areas ordinance, and once annexed it would be under our critical areas ordinance with buffers and wetland buffers and those kind of things.
Well, thank you. That's all I had. I just wanted to express my support and thanks.
Councilmember Martz.
So I have a proposed amendment, but I don't want to enter it until we finished our conversation with the folks who are in front of us.
Other questions or discussion? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. This question is probably for Trish. Trish, in our agenda bill, we have a description of CFF, and in CFF that it describes what the CFF zone is primarily for, and the last among those is for public-private projects.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see that in CFR.
Correct.
So does that, if it
doesn't preclude it, but
Okay.
it was sort of a shout out, I love that term, to working with the schools, working with the state park, so that those would be for bigger projects that maybe don't have a label that is easily put into a specific zone. Maybe if Puget Sound Energy wanted to have, a windmill or a solar something, we could work with them on one of their sites to do a public-private partnership. It would kind of cover those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Councilmember Martz.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a proposed amendment to this bill. In Agenda Bill 6802, I propose striking the language of Section 3 of the resolution and replacing it with the following language. The proposed zoning designation for the annexation area shall be expected to be the comparable zoning of community facilities recreation in accordance with IMC 18.06.060 annexation classification.
Second.
So, and I want to make sure Megan gets one. Thanks. So I was one of the people that wanted to bring this back to Land and Shore, and I came out of Land and Shore feeling a little bit like Jason and the Argonauts. I had a quest I needed to go do, so I went and I looked at Coulon and Marymore as exemplars of parks that have really defined themselves well in their community. They're not cookie cutter. They're not, our state park isn't going to look like either of those exactly. But I took a look, and I took a look at CFR and CFF, and I didn't see anything in either park that I thought necessitated CFF. There are concession food stands, or permanent concession stands at Coulon, and that is in line with accessory concession stands that's part of CFR. In addition, I went back to the Lake Sammamish State Park Redevelopment and Restoration Concept Plan, and that calls out specifically that CFR is in line with the vision for the state park. And they go on in their introduction to describe a long-standing community opposition to certain redevelopments that include indoor water park, conference centers, and even office space. And so there's a call out for conference centers, and whether that means a conference center or a confluence center, there may be, you could look at interpretations as to what would be allowed under CFR or CFF, but there's certainly a documentation of community concern in regards to some of these potential redevelopments. So what do we have in front of us? We have two paths. Both would enable fundamental transformation of the state park, I think, and even hearing further this evening, the comments from the folks from the state parks that CFR would cover these areas. They mentioned food services, which again is covered under CFR. Meeting rooms, confluence center, I freely admit that one's a little bit more of a challenge, but trailheads would certainly be covered under CFR as well. We don't know what a public-private partnership would look like in this situation. And so I would submit that conservation of this incredible resource says, let us be more cautious in stepping forward. So many of the things that we're interested in are available in CFR. If a great opportunity arises that would be CFF, we can certainly rezone it if necessary. We have a unique environmental and geographical need that's best manifest by continued city council oversight. This is the first thing that people see when they come into our city. And I'm excited about redevelopment, but some of the things listed under CFF I'm personally not excited about, and I don't get to decide personally, but I think this council should get to decide if it's a CFF type of development. The state is facing profound and a historical funding crisis this year in meeting the McCleary decision. And we see that manifest in this initiative I-351, which would just be a neutron bomb to all state funding efforts. And in this space, it will be very challenging for the state, and I am confident that the state will make decisions about their state park that is in line with their values, but there will be pressures to open up revenue opportunities, and the city needs to be involved in that conversation because of those pressures that will be on the state. So for all those reasons, I urge you to accept this amendment to the bill in front of us. Thank you.
Councilmember Scher.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur in the motion to amend, and I would encourage you as my colleagues to join in Tola's motion as well for the following reasons. And I think he's named quite a few of them already, and there's just a few things I want to add. So when you look at the agenda bill at what types of things fit within CFR and CFF, CFR is the outdoor recreation oriented. It's the ball fields, the community parks, interpretive trails, concession stands, such as was mentioned at Coulon, tot lot parks. All things that are a higher level of use than just mere open space, but not quite to the level of CFF, which talks about generating high levels of traffic involving utilities, government facilities, libraries, daycare, you name it, park and rides, museums, or this ambiguous public-private projects. Now, does that mean that if we zone the park CFF, we're going to suddenly have mini malls and museums and banquet reception halls springing up? Of course not. Those opportunities are not there. But as Tola pointed out, I think that the responsible thing for us to do at this point in time is to not jump to the most extreme level of zoning to allow the greatest level of uses, but rather to take the next step in this process as we proceed with annexation, which I fully support this bill otherwise, before we decide if CFF is an appropriate zoning option. And the things that guide that, I looked at one article I found in the Issaquah Press from the end of 2012, so not that long ago, almost 2 years ago, and it talked about how the Parks and Rec Commission was looking at proposals for Lake Sammamish State Park, and the agency considered numerous proposals for the parkland: conference center, indoor water park, office space, sports venues, but public opposition led officials to abandon the proposal. Now, when you look at the list of things I mentioned in CFF, all of those things, conference centers, indoor water parks, office space, those are all CFF. And it's very telling to me that there was significant public opposition that led the commission to abandoning the proposal at that time, is around maybe 2000 or 2001. When you look at the Central Issaquah plan, the park was not included directly in the plan, but it borders the plan. And you look at the map and it talks about the conceptual green necklace. We want the growth and the density to coalesce in the central area. That was the whole point, I thought, of doing the central area plan, not to see those types of CFF developments encroach into the state park. Again, as Tola pointed out, if such opportunities arise, we can come back, we can assess them, we can assess their impacts. You know, high levels of traffic, that really concerns me, to just open the gates and say, let's go CFF, and there might be high levels of traffic, because I don't think we have the infrastructure. We've heard about the pedestrian bike pinch point from the Greenwood Point residents who live near the state park. We are planning some traffic improvements at 12th Avenue and Northwest Sammamish Road, but those are some years away. In fact, that would be the last thing as part of the North Issaquah roadway network that we do. And then we look at also, and I think Tola forgot to mention this, but there's a report from 2007, and Eileen was on the committee or commission, whatever it was constituted, that put this report together, and a lot of other elected officials and community leaders. Page 22 of that report says, while Issaquah's public facilities land use and CFR zoning is consistent with the proposed use of the park, city and county residential zoning has resulted in non-conforming land uses for a number of existing facilities, as well as precluding some proposed facilities. So the report recognized, based on all the things that were proposed for the state park as recently as 2007, that the CFR zoning was consistent with those proposed uses. And that, again, fits with the amendment that Tola is proposing. So I believe very strongly, for all of those reasons, I'm just loath to jump to CFF, and I was very uncomfortable when this last came before the council in terms of that zoning. And with the amendment this evening, I fully support Tola's proposal. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Barber?
Thank you, Mayor. I've been on a number of different committees that have been looking at this for some time now, and have met with park staff earlier or in this year. I think I'm going to have difficulty supporting Tola's amendment, based on the fact that I think there are, especially if we're starting to look at Hans Jensen. Hans Jensen is one of those areas that absolutely is able to be developed into some conference centers. There was some great designs that have already been presented in regards to these being uses as conference centers. It would not, and has not, any of the designs that I've ever seen for this lead anyone to believe that this is a very densely populated facility, as you would take it. The Parks Department is very understands exactly that this is a park. Their intent is to make sure that this remains a park, that it's a beautiful open space that we have. But there is also the need for them to be able to hopefully keep this park open and operating and continuing to improve it. And in order to do that, there perhaps may be some, other than governmental support funding for this, there might be some opportunity for some other means of supporting this. And the use and the generation of dollars from the Hans Jensen Conference Center, if this comes to fruition, we don't know. This is going to be a very slow moving, and the idea of any of this all of a sudden springing up and we've got, a very large, densely populated area down there, I don't believe is anything what Parks has intended for this beautiful open space. But the truth is that it is an urban park. It is going to be an urban state park, very different from a lot of what I remember as a youth going and camping in our tent and our old cooler. This is a very different look and feel from that. But the support and the financial support from this park goes back to the state and goes to maintain and operate all the rest of the state's state parks for their uses. So at this moment in time, I'm not seeing a problem with leaving the agenda bill as is, with CFF allowed as a opportunity for them. I don't see it happening anytime in the near future, but the opportunity is there. Especially just the amount of time that I've been working with state parks, working forward with this, I will not be supporting the amended motion. Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Councilmember Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tolette, and thank you, Josh. I think it's an awesome amendment. However, I'll say up front that I am hesitant to support it, and I want to tell you why. I think this is really a great discussion, and I hope we'll hear from more council members about their opinions on the amendment. I really like this because I was interested in it being recreation, and I was interested in the open space. But over time and in further study, the condition of an urban park has a relationship with a very dense city center that is a little different than what it's had in the past. I still, though, carry the banner that the Central Issaquah Plan and the density that surrounds the park is the asset. You know, the park doesn't need to be the economic engine of the city of Issaquah, because that is going to happen around the border with a beautiful park. So for our economic vitality, I'm looking for a beautiful park to support the economic vitality of the Central Issaquah Plan that surrounds it. So in that way, I'm still very intrigued with what you say. I was entirely against the whole thing being CFF, and relieved to see that only one portion out of the 4, although a big one, was designated as CFF rather than CF Recreation. And it's frustrating that the parcel lines, the one convenient way to distinguish between one and another, seem so arbitrary. But I'm hoping that our critical areas will help smooth those, and the dedication that the parks and the interest that they have in those areas. I wanted to bring up as an anecdotal example where we went for our goal setting. It was a beautiful recreation center that represented the natural area well, and acted as a stewardship center for it. And it also did not provide any parking, which was an awesome thing. It was a real statement saying, hey, we want people to be here. We want people to come here. We just don't want people to drive here. And it was a challenge for us, but we did it. And I walked all the way through the park and got lost twice to get there, and it was great. So I think there are ways for us to do this that are consistent with our Issaquah ethics. The public-private partnership, I think, is something that needs to be available to us in order for these facilities to be created within the park. And that's what I had written down. I really appreciate this discussion, though, and that's just kind of where I'm sitting, and I want to share my ideas. So thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. Tola, thank you for the amendment. I appreciate that, and I also appreciate being able to have this discussion here and have everybody here to help us make this decision. I too will have trouble supporting the amendment. I think that the split zoning is appropriate here, and for a number of reasons. First, regarding the CFF concerns, I think we have a number of checks and balances in our system. First of all, there are limits with regard to land use, what you can actually do in CFF. We have those in our own code. We've talked about those. And then there's another layer, the environmental regulations that we have will help guide what we do in those areas that's appropriate for the park. And thirdly, we've also talked about tonight that the State Parks Commission has sort of its own limits on what will be allowed, and they scrutinize projects very, very carefully, as we have come to learn over the past few years. And then thirdly, as we heard earlier, the public is very involved in what happens in the park, and if they don't like it, we're going to hear about it. And so whatever is proposed in the future for the park, there will be a public process, and what ends up happening at the park will really be the will of the people as part of that public process. I also think that the split zoning is consistent with the state's classification. Well, I don't think it is. We heard that it's consistent with the state parks classification for that, for the park, and that's important to me because I feel as though we need to give the state, particularly at this time, the flexibility that it needs to both implement its plans and also the flexibility that it needs during this time of financial struggle and trying to figure out what the future holds for state parks. And I'm greatly interested in giving state parks the latitude to kind of figure out how they can make the state parks work for them. I think we have a mutual interest in that, making sure that our state parks agency is healthy financially, making sure that our parks are healthy financially, and I think in my own opinion, the only way that we can do that is to perhaps give ourselves a little bit of flexibility and latitude to be a little bit more creative and figure out how we might be able to do things a little differently. And for those reasons, I'm in favor of the split zoning.
Other questions or comments? Council Member Witterside.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Beller. So in response to the proposed change, what the number one factor for me is that the landowner who petitioned us for annexation has yes, over the years has sought and received guidance from outside entities, and I think the 2007 report is a good example of that. But we all know that things have changed quite a bit in terms of the economy, and we also know that the state, and when it comes to funding of state parks, has taken a dramatic different direction since then as well. And I think it's kind of exciting to know that we actually happen to be in a place where the state has a park next to an urban area. It may be the only one within their system. And we have an opportunity now to collaborate long-term for the long-term viability of that park. But as the landowner who is charged with, and we've heard tonight, is very interested in there being a long-term viable park, I think our proposal, as it currently is in the agenda bill, with just the one parcel remaining at community facilities, that the landowner feels that is a good designation to help them realize, their vision for the park. And I think and like has already been mentioned, there are enough other interests overlying, the sensitive areas, the commission, the existing state parks land classifications, that I'm confident that any type of potential proposed development consistent with CFF will be done with proper stewardship that we all seek and desire, and will be done in a way that is consistent with the wishes of, I think, all the key stakeholders. So I like the idea, if we bring this section of land into our jurisdiction and zone that one parcel as CFF, then the landowners have the tools to help achieve what they think is necessary. And I know they're going to partner with other key stakeholders to make sure that it's done right. And I'm going to defer to, I think, the interests and wishes of the landowners in this regard, and I'm not going to be supporting the amendment.
Councilmember Pauly.
I'll be very brief. The conversation tonight has been wonderful on both sides, and I think both Tola and Josh presented a lot of information tonight that was very convincing. But the two things that stick out for me is I want to have something that is flexible for the landowner. I want to make sure that the state park has the opportunity to look at and create appropriate economic opportunities to enhance and improve the park. And I do believe the state park staff have worked so well with the public and so well with us before, and when we're talking about the park, we really do seem to get a lot of interested groups come out. We get a lot of opinions. Friends of Lake Sammamish State Park, citizen input, all of it seems to come together. So I'm confident with the original proposal, not the amendment, that it gives the state parks the opportunity and the flexibility to do what they need to do to make this economically viable. So I will not be supporting the amendment.
So I believe everyone has had an opportunity to speak, and with that then, we will vote on the amendment, and that is to amend the main motion to add the striking of the language of Section 3 of the resolution and replacing it with the following language. The proposed zoning designation for the annexation area shall be expected to be comparable zoning of communities facility recreation in accordance with IMC 18.06.060 annexation classification. All those in favor of supporting the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
Nay.
Nay.
The amendment fails. Moving now to the main motion. Are you ready to vote on the main motion?
If I can be heard on the main motion, then.
Yes.
So, comment was made on the amendment about the state parks being the landowner, and that may be true insofar as title, but I see the landowner as the people of this region. The public is the owner of public lands, and the public is our master as civil servants as well. And I look back again at the Lake Sammamish redevelopment and restoration concept plan, where it talks about how public opposition to a facility development plan galvanized when the Parks and Rec Commission considered its adoption in 2003. Concerns were cited about increased traffic and impacts to wetlands and wildlife habitat. Many participants also expressed significant concern about, quote, commercialization of the park, fearing that any private financial interest would eventually dominate decision-making at the expense of resource protection, aesthetics, and the natural park experience. Agency staff then concluded they failed to make a compelling case for a revenue-generating state park. You know, again, this report was 7 years ago. I just sort of wonder why we do these things sometimes, why we go through this exercise of countless hours as described in the report and put together a plan that says something is consistent with a certain type of zoning, and then we sort of torpedo that and we look at what the public wanted within the last decade, and I just have to go with what the public wants, and that is not CFF zoning. There has been significant opposition to that. I am very concerned about opening the floodgates using that type of zoning. I don't think that is the right zoning for the entirety of the state park. And again, while I fully support annexation of the state park and I support further development in the state park, I do not support CFF for the entirety of the state park. So for those reasons, I just think the zoning issue is a bridge too far for me to support this particular agenda bill, and that alone is enough for me to vote against it.
Councilmember Winterstein.
Thank you. So the agenda bill I will be considering is proposing community facilities recreations for parcels 2, 5, and 4, and community facilities only for parcels 1 and 3. So that is what I'm going to be supporting, and that's the way the bill is written.
Councilmember Martz.
So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to support this bill because I fundamentally support doing something innovative with the state park. I'm confident that the state has heard the concerns raised today in this council, and I will just say that some of the ideas that I have heard in a public-private partnership, I have real trouble with, and so I'll just say, you know, if down the road somebody proposes doing some sort of marquee restaurant, you know, some high-end restaurant, or, you know, people have said, what if you do a lodge? No lodge has actually been proposed yet, but, you know, people have had conversations about it. I, as a private citizen of the state of Washington and as an Issaquah resident, will do everything I can to oppose such a thing. It would be, you know, it's just really disconcerting to hear thoughts about restaurants going into the state park. So I'm going to support this bill, confident that people in the city and people in the state understand the concerns that were raised here tonight. Thanks.
Is there anyone else desiring to comment on the main motion? Councilmember Scher.
Thank you. I guess there seemed to be a look of confusion as to my comments, and I just want to clarify. I fully understand that 3 of the parcels are slated for CFR zoning. My concern is with 1 and 3, especially those which are closest to Northwest Sammamish Road. And, you know, once something's zoned, it's zoned. So I'm not sure where the public would get to participate in that process of deciding what type of CFF would go in there. Once we zone it, we zone it. So absent a council decision to change the zoning, it's all going to be CFF. And again, I think that's the bridge too far for me.
Councilmember Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. I had one more little thing I wanted to say earlier, and it's germane to what we're saying now. I'm excited that we've gone this direction, not necessarily because of the going away from the amendment, but that. And one thing that Councilmember Mart said in the amendment was that if a really great applicant came up, we could always change. And I want the city to decide its direction and to chart its course and to make clear messages that this is what we want or this is not what we want, rather than being reactionary to something that might be very intriguing or enticing. This is a more ambiguous policy decision that is not tainted by perhaps temptations. And I like that we've gone somewhere, at least as a majority, that says, well, this is what I can be comfortable with. So.
Anyone else desiring to comment? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment. Josh has referred to the 2007 plan a few times. It's been referred to more than once tonight. And you're right, that was 7 years ago by my careful math. But this is a new time. There are some significant and new and real financial struggles. And in light of those financial struggles, the state parks held a series of meetings a couple of years ago, having the public come out and learn about the details of the financial realities, and asked folks to participate in some workshops about what they would like to see, what they'd be interested, what could they handle, what would be acceptable, what would be not acceptable. And I attended one of those meetings and workshops, and I was very impressed with the level of detail that was presented to the public. I was equally as impressed with the interest and commitment on the part of the folks, the public who attended those meetings, who sincerely understand the struggle and the dilemma that's going on at state parks, and also appreciated the opportunity to provide ideas about what they would be willing to support in terms of new creative opportunities to create revenue at state parks. So the public really cares. They do understand that although plans like the 2007 plan are wonderful plans, they may not be feasible in their entirety any longer. And so I just wanted to say that I'd been part of one of those workshops and was impressed with what people are willing to consider without going overboard, and that Parks was sincerely interested in making sure that they maintain, like somebody else mentioned, the integrity of their parks without sort of going all Disneyland.
Anyone else? Are you ready to vote on the main motion? All those in favor of approving resolution number 2014-16, accepting the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission's notice of intent to petition for annexation for the area known as the Lake Sammamish State Park, providing for the assumption of indebtedness and payment of taxes, establishing zoning for the property to be annexed, and authorizing the mayor to submit a notice of intent to annex to the Washington State Boundary Review Board of King County, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
The motion carries by a vote of 6-1 with Councilmember Scher in opposition. Peter, Nikki, Trish, you had to stand up there for a long time, but your input was very helpful. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Moving now to item number 8C, Agenda Bill 6846, Financial System / Enterprise Resource Planning System. This is coming back from the Services and Safety Committee, and that is Councilmember Barber.
Yes, this is, I'm going to directly send it off to our Finance Department, Diane Marcotte, and it looks like she's got quite a presentation put together for us this evening. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Councilmember Barber. Tonight has been a very long journey for the city of Issaquah. We have been working on bringing this recommendation forward to the council for a little over 2 years. And as part of that journey, some of the things that, in just summary, is that we did a lot of research, we did a lot of analysis, we did a lot of outreach to our stakeholders, which are both internal customers within the city of Issaquah, as well as some of our external customers. So we've tried to reach out and do a significant amount of due diligence in bringing this recommendation forward. So when we started down this road, we looked at what was it that we were looking to in order to bring this recommendation forward. So when we started down this road, what we wanted to do was to continue with the philosophy that we engaged in a couple of years ago of becoming a high-performance organization. So when we looked at our software, the things that we were considering were a lot of these items on the list. Some of these are internal. For us in the finance department, it's a central repository for all of our financial data. We wanted to improve our business processes and workflows. Many of the ways we do things, we still continue to have a significant reliance upon a paper product, a paper trail. And we also have a number of redundancies because of limitations of access to our current system by its end users. We want integration with some of our major software programs. When I first came here approximately 2 years ago, part of the conversation was that because our current system wasn't providing us with the functionality that we desired, many of the departments were looking at either what I would call boutique software in order to meet their needs or vocational software. And so when we looked at the larger analysis of this, was there an ERP system that would satisfy some of our users' needs that can be integrated and have a continuous workflow? Automation and reduction in paper handling. As the council members know, currently we do not, and you'll see further down, we do not have e-bills for our utility accounts. Issaquah prides itself on technology, and so this would be inconsistent with our sustainability objectives. One of the other things is we don't have a lot of self-service when internally and with our utility customers in particular. Employees have to come in either to the finance department or human resources to make some of the fundamental changes. That much of it can be made online, as well as our utility customers. Right now, in order to bridge customers' desires, we have an online system where you can do a lookup, but it doesn't really interface with our current system, and it was developed by one of our consultants. So as our software changes, we would then have to bring in some changes there. And we wanted it to be more intuitive and user-friendly. There's always one of the hesitations, and particularly internally, some of our customers are afraid to use the system because they think they're going to break it. And so the system that we are recommending has more of a look and a feel of what people are used to under the Microsoft product suite. A little bit of the history. The city has been using the Eden system for over 20 years. Currently, there are about 260 customers nationwide that are using Eden. Eden was actually developed in the state of Washington for the city of Eden, for the city of Auburn, and that is part of the reason there is not a very large number of people that are using the software. When we implemented the system, if you're familiar with accounting, the general ledger was implemented as a standalone system. So it does an interface with some of our other modules and their standalone modules that then we need to take the data and manipulate the data to get into the general ledger system. And so there's utility billing that's standalone, capital projects and grant accounting. Our work order system, we do not utilize it. We do not have a procurement system, human resources, and the accounts receivable and cash receipting system are also very antiquated. And also we don't have any off-site disaster recovery, and that would also provide that additional layer of protection since we do not have off-site disaster recovery. The current status of our software, we do not have workflow, and what workflow means is if I enter in an invoice, for instance, of, oh, it didn't come up. Oh, thank you. So if I were to enter in an invoice that required secondary approval, the system would automatically push that data and that information to the next approver who would then approve that data. Currently what we have is, if you've ever been into our building, you'll see a lot of purple files moving around the second floor of our admin building, and that's just sort of our key to go, oh, here's a document, here's a form that needs to keep moving through our system. And then once again, we've talked about what some of our goals were, and these are some of the things that weren't working in our current system. Probably one of the most important things is our payroll timekeeping system. We are, as we call it, we are a customer of one. That is an internally developed system that only the city of Issaquah uses. When that system is down, we have to rely upon one person in our information technology department to support us. And besides that one individual, really no one in the city really understands how that system was constructed or built. And also with our current software, given that there are only 260 customers and overall they have a customer base of about 11,000 customers, they will the current software we have will not be enhanced, meaning it will not be bringing in new functionality. They would continue to maintain the system and make any necessary improvements, whether it's requirements of federal and state regulations or whether maybe another customer has asked for some customization, they would bring that in and make it available to us. The search process, just a little bit about this is when I first came here in early 2012, the city was embarking upon a consultant study to look at what was our technology and information needs. This was unrelated to our current accounting system. When the then consultants, some of the council members may remember this report, but the number one issue that came out was we needed a better financial system and we needed better information. I have been through several technology upgrades as well as new implementation, and so before what came forward with a recommendation, I recommended to the administration that we have what I call a second opinion, because whenever you do a technology change, it's very hard because it has a lot to do with change management. So we brought in Strzok and Associates to do a second evaluation of our system, and they basically reached the same conclusion that we needed to look at doing something different with our current system. And as you can see, we distributed questionnaires to all of our users. We had multiple focus group meetings to get their feedback, what was working, what wasn't working, what things would you like. And then we looked at the current system to determine how it would perform our needs into the organization. And again, once again, it's a very manual process, it's very cumbersome, and we tend to rely heavily on spreadsheets. So some of the things that we looked at was, what about re-engineering, reinstalling Eden, because it's an existing system, we're comfortable, we know what it's doing. When we did that evaluation, it was pretty much we would have to start from scratch. Well, if we're starting from scratch, shouldn't we look at another system that might have greater functionality and greater abilities? So then we looked at other vendors and other software. One of the things that we have been doing is following on the coattails of San Marco, Texas. At the time that we were going through our evaluation, they were going out for a full request for proposal. We connected with them and sort of shadowed them. We actually went to Irving School District in Texas when they were doing their assessment. They allowed us to come along, and while they were making their assessment, we got to sit in on all the various group meetings when they were evaluating the Munis software. So what we looked at was going with Munis, and that's our recommendation. We're doing an upgrade, and more importantly, they would give us credit for our current licenses. So when we looked at the cost of upgrading versus a new system implementation, looking at what the city of Linwood was looking at, as well as San Marco, as well as a couple of other cities, it became very clear to us that the cost savings was in doing an upgrade, and we would still continue to get our desired outcome. Additionally, we participated in a number of webinars with Munis. We attended about 5 of their user groups meeting. We went on site visits to Bainbridge Island, Mukilteo, City of Marysville. We interviewed Metro Parks. We interviewed Woodinville Water District. So we've done a lot of due diligence and a lot of outreach in coming to this decision. In addition, what we came to understand was during this process, we learned that there was a lot of functionality out there that we currently weren't employing and we thought would be added value to it. So the recommendation includes work orders and facilities management. That's particularly important in our Parks Department right now. They continue to use spreadsheets to track some of the work that they do in our city-owned facilities. We don't have anything for employment tracking. So when we go out and we are looking for new employees, we have a very manual system. This system would then, as we hired people, it would move it from HR into payroll, into various parts of our system. Employee self-service, probably one of the biggest things because of the number of volumes, utility billing self-service, whether it's credit cards, whether it's inquiry, whether it's address changes. So people would become more sufficient, can look at this information and data at any hours of the night. Enhanced cashiering functionality. Utility billing interface right now is a standalone system that doesn't integrate into our accounting system. Document management. Building our annual financial report, integration amongst all modules, and also the opportunity to use encumbrance accounting. So this Munis, some of the miscellaneous is that the Tyler will move, we will move from a license to a subscription-based service. We'll be provided with off-site disaster recovery. We'll be provided with off-site database management. We'll have the look and feel of office products, which everybody really likes. And then Tyler is a very large company and traded on the stock exchange. They have around 1,900 ERP users, but they have overall around 11,000 customers. Now the big one is moving from what we call hosted to subscription service. I must admit, when this was first brought up, I wasn't necessarily an advocate of a subscription-based service. It actually took me about 3 months of research to get to a place where I was really comfortable and wanted to be able to recommend to this council that this was a really good decision for the city of Issaquah. So subscription-based service is it is having Tyler Technology host our software and maintain it and work with us with any upgrades. So once we spent about 2 hours talking to, we have a couple of Tyler representatives here, Bill Lane and some of his folks, as well as Christina Henriksen. We've spent about 2 or 3 months. Bob and I, the city administrator and I had a number of conversations. And so we eventually got to a place, and then a lot of it is there, if this was 5 years from now, it would be a very easy decision, because the reality is that most government is in fact going hosted. And so once we sort of overcame that hurdle, we realized that this was really a good business decision for the city of Issaquah. So then we had to do a cost comparison. What's the difference between hosted and subscription-based service? And as you can see, when we did a 5-year analysis, it's pretty much a wash, but I think what you really get out of it is that intangible, in that you are working with Tyler, who always understands where we're at, what is going on. We also we relieve ourselves of being dependent on one database administrator that really understands our product and our services. So this would be the average annual investment. Now this is not additional new dollars, because we currently are paying a maintenance fee, and that maintenance fee is around $80,000 a year. So this includes what we normally would have looked at is over a $600,000 investment plus our annual maintenance. And you can see when we did the cost comparison, subscription-based service came out just a few dollars less than hosting it. This is our overall project budget, and looking at it from 2014 to 2019, you can see in 2014 we would be investing around $183,000. In the agenda bill, we say around $250,000. A lot depends on when we work with the consultants on the implementation. So we know at a minimum it's $183,000, but if we're a little bit ahead of schedule as we bring them in to help us with our modules, it could just be a little bit more this year, which then we would have a little bit spent less in the following years. And in the first year in particular, the license fee is for those new modules that I talked about earlier that we would then pay for in the initial year, and then the maintenance would be included in the subsequent years. When we went to the committee, they were interested in what modules fell under what phase. For core financials, we're looking someplace between a 9-month to a 12-month implementation. A lot depends on internally vacations, our ability to work with the implementers, and Tyler's scheduling. So under core financials would be our Munis office, our role tailor dashboards, and our document management. It would be general ledger, chart of accounts. Chart of accounts becomes very important. Budgeting, purchasing, AP, project grant accounting, accounts receivable billing, and fixed assets. So then what happens is when we're sort of finishing up phase 1, we go into phase 2. Phase 2 is the human resources payroll related function, and you can see that takes us nearly a year to implement. We're just sort of finishing up general ledger when we begin rolling out human resources and payroll. Then when we're finishing up payroll, then we begin bringing in the next team, which is work orders, fleet and facilities, and the CAFR, which is the city's annual financial report. As we're finishing up that one, the last phase that we bring in will be utility billing and revenue, which includes customer self-service, our cashiering system, and then taking our GIS system and integrating it into utilities. So that helps us. Right now we manually enter in all new addresses as they're entered into the GIS system because it's not linked up. So as you can see, this is about a 2.5 year implementation. Will be, like I said earlier, very much a change management process for the city of Issaquah, because what we want to do, one of the things that we've expressed to Tyler is we want to know what best business practices are that they've seen in other cities. Work with us, tell us some of the creative ideas that others are doing so that when we're at the end of the day, we have given you the best product that is available. So our recommendation is to enter into a relationship with Tyler to upgrade to Munis. They have what they call their evergreen solution, which means transferring the title, our current licenses to our existing. We've talked about the number of their customers. What it will do is improve our business process, integrate well with our other software, increase our automation, decrease our document management paper process, and increase our reporting capabilities. So one of our visions is if you are a department director, when you come in the morning, you will have things on your dashboard, whether it be financial information, whether it be grant accounting, and that information, when we work with the department directors, that will come up on your dashboard. Some of the information we want to push out is more financial information to the department directors. They have very limited access to the system currently. So in conclusion, these are the benefits as we see them, and we would recommend Munis over, as you can see, over any of the other options that we looked at. One thing that has come to light in the last day and a half is there is some questions with regards to liability and insurance in the existing contract. Our recommendation is a motion to amend the original motion to indicate authorize the mayor to enter into and execute the Munis contract with Tyler Technologies for the Munis ERP software application pending legal counsel review. So we just have this one last question that we now have. We've been working with some folks in Ogden Murphy Wallace that have been giving us some assistance today. They indicated they just need a little bit more time to work with the legal department from Tyler, but we're all confident we'll be able to resolve this one last remaining issue. And with that, I can answer any questions, well, most questions.
Councilmember Barber. Oh,
Would you like a motion on the floor?
well, then we can discuss it and consider it.
I'd like to move this evening to authorize the mayor to enter into and execute the Munis contract with Tyler Technologies for the Munis ERP software application, subject to legal, I'm sorry. Would you like me to
Pending-
repeat that, Fred? It was not.
Pending legal counsel review.
Would you like me to repeat?
If you would,
Okay.
and add
Subject to legal review.
pending legal counsel review.
Move to authorize the mayor to enter into and execute the Munis contract with Tyler Technologies for the Munis ERP software application, subject to legal review.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Councilmember Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Diane. Can you help me understand on the cover page to this bill, it says expenditure required $250,000, amount budgeted $600,000.
So because we budget annually, the 600,000, we were hopeful that we would have made better progress during the year. So of that 600,000, we're only anticipating spending 250,000. The remaining amount would then, whatever we think we're not going to spend, we would reappropriate into the 2015 budget.
So is it annualized? Forgive me, I'm having to scroll between slides. Is it annualized closer to 600,000? Is that the issue?
No. Originally, we thought we were going, when we worked with the council several years ago, we originally thought we were going to be doing an upgrade to our system where we would host it. And so then that would require a lot of money and an investment up front of 600,000 plus annual maintenance. As we became more knowledgeable and we learned about the options that are available, we then went to where we then decided that the best option for the city was to do a subscription base. So it's really hard to compare apples to apples anymore because we were actually changing our original direction. So if you looked at that one slide, what we tried to then say was, instead of spending $600,000 tomorrow, what we would be doing if we had done a hosted versus a subscription base as a comparison, here's what the dollars would look like since what we originally started down the road changed from where we are today.
You expected more upfront and less annualized, and instead it's more balanced annualized because it's hosted. I understand. Thank you.
And so the project budget is shown on page 252 of your packet, and that shows the annual cost through the implementation period. Councilmember Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. Son? Yeah. Thank you, Diane. Excellent. I have first a question, following up with your interest and concern about the budget. So originally there was a budget amount, and then we're going to spend this money, and then we're done. Yeah. And now we're not spending this money and we're done. We're engaging in something that's going to have a long-term impact on our budget. And so we have it annualized out for 5 years, but is there any way to anticipate, and for our budget planning, what does this mean for our future, as far as costs?
So currently the contract is that for 5 years, the dollar amounts will be fixed at this annualized amount. For years 6 and 7, the contract has indicated no more increase in our annual cost of 3% a year. And then beyond year 7 is sort of, you're really getting out there, and I think probably the world will be changing again by year 7 or 8.
Okay, thank you. May I continue, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Thank you. And then I wanted to comment on the legal review and really thank you for for the work on that. The 2 items, and they're on page, if anyone wants to look at them with me, 204 of the packet, which is page 8 of the contract. One of them is the indemnification clause, and the other is limitations of liability. And in the indemnity, it includes provisions for negligence and willful misconduct, which I thought were inappropriate to include, and sent up a red flag to me, wondering, is this an appropriate language to include for either participant, because we are indemnified for it too, but it didn't seem like the appropriate thing. So I know that our attorneys are working on that, and that's one of the main concerns that I had about the indemnification clause. In limitation of liability, appreciate also continued work on that, as I see increased risk as we embark in something that is a hosted solution. The software as a service, this kind of language might be appropriate if you're hosting it yourself. But when the vendor is hosting it, they're taking on the responsibility of personal information and other city information, and it exposes us to a great deal of risk as well as them. So I appreciate some further scrutiny on that. To close with a question about that, when we present it to legal review and then you come up with solutions, is there a further, do we need to see it again? Does that just go, does our legal review do the best they can for us? You know, what's the outcome?
Yes, the outcome is that we'll be engaging in discussions with Tyler's legal counsel, who is closed, or we weren't able to get a hold of them today since they're on the East Coast, and determine what we can do. We have people in our office that have worked with other software companies for or other software contracts. We're aware of the issues surrounding it. It's a matter of risk management. It's a matter of bargaining. And it's a matter of judgment by the city of the level of risk and the potential for risk in this particular arrangement. So we'll do the best we can. Ultimately, it will be the decision of the administration to whether to accept that or not.
If I might add also, one of the, particularly about one of the risks associated with our data and our information, one of the critical pieces in evaluating this was to ensure that Tyler Technology was what we call PCI compliance. And so they have to go through a process of assuring that the data they are storing and managing is protected from security and risk. Just as we have to do with our, we have many of our software systems that we're currently working through the PCI compliance. So that was also a critical piece to us to make sure that they were adhering to it, that they had processes in place to ensure data integrity and protection of data.
Excellent, and thank you, Wayne, for that additional comment that that the resolution of this work with the legal teams comes back to the administration for their further scrutiny to see that it upholds the concerns that we have. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Other questions or discussion? Councilmember Scher.
Oh, thank you. So I have two questions. One is probably easily answered. Maybe I already know the answer, but is there anything in this software platform that allows better access to things like agenda bills or functionality on our website? Because when you go on the website, you can't access agendas older than 2012. Or is this only internal stuff?
At this point in time, we did not choose to change our current vendor. There are some functionality that we would be looking at into the future, and one of them is they have that ability, but it was sort of like how much can we take on and how much can we do. So certainly after we see how the initial process goes, you know, we definitely have an interest in other modules, but we're not recommending them at this time.
Thank you. My other issue piggybacks on Nina's comments about safety and security. And, you know, we hear frequently about hackers getting access to personal information. And I may be a little old-fashioned and send a lot of my bills by snail mail, but I'm sure there's a lot of my personal information floating out there on the internet somewhere in somebody's possession. And, you know, it really didn't hit me actually until your presentation, Diane, about the licensing versus the hosting. And then it sort of freaked me out, this idea that a lot of city information, whether it's online billing information for utilities, whether it's confidential communications like those covered by attorney-client privilege, sensitive information that would not ordinarily be disclosed in the course of, say, you know, a public records request would be held by a third party. And while I'm sure that the representatives of Tyler would say, we're totally secure, we're in great shape, it wouldn't probably be in their business interest to say otherwise, I'm sure that a lot of major corporations have said the same thing, and sure enough, you know, those events have occurred. So I fully concur with Nina's comments and concerns about the limitations on liability, the legal review. But I guess my question is, what can be pointed to, well, I guess maybe it's twofold. One, what are the security measures in place? I love the offsite data storage. I think that's great to have that backup for security purposes. But what is the comfort level that we can tell our constituents about the security of our data? And then number two, what happens in the contract if there is a breach? If there is, you know, city information is hacked, or I noticed that confidentiality only seems to run 2 years from the end of the agreement, which is also a little troublesome and freaky when you have third parties accessing this information. But what happens? Is it just nobody's liable here if there's a hack or breach? I say hack, data breach. So maybe if we can talk about the security for a moment, and then what happens if there is a breach, and I'm sure they'll tell us that's never going to happen, but I just want to know contractually what would be the case. Thank you.
I really actually heard three different questions in there. The first one was you sort of mentioned our email system. First off, our email system, with the exception of those things as far as workflow and everything, would only, that piece of it would come through the software system. But our email system is a Microsoft product and is separate from this functionality. And also in some ways this product is better because this company is a large enough company that they have a team of folks that maintain the data and the integrity because of their requirement to be PCI compliant. Quite frankly, internally, we struggle because we are such a small entity. We struggle because internally we don't have that level of expertise. I'm not sure if Bill from Tyler can address some of your own security measures that you employ within your system, but this is Bill Lane, a technology. I'll defer to the title.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Lane. I work as I'm a vice president in charge of the sales division, so I'm not a proclaimed technology expert, a security administrator, but I could just give you a point of reference. I think some of the items that you're talking about have legal ramifications, and through our discussions on the contract and the couple of legal items, if there are additional security issues, you don't have a technical discussion or get into more detail, we'd be more than happy to do so. I can tell you from a reference standpoint, as a company that provides hosted solutions, we do not outsource our hosted solutions to a third-party company. That's pretty standard in the industry, that you'll contract with us, and then we hire a company and you rent rack space from someone or a company, and then they host it, and then we get into finger pointing. These are all Tyler employees. These are all Tyler-owned data centers. We have 2. One is in Yarmouth, Maine, in the Munis office. One is in the old Federal Reserve building in Dallas, Texas. And so we have about 45 dedicated employees that do nothing but work in a hosting environment. That's their job, is to maintain that. As far as breaches and security, the data, once it leaves and you're connected through a pipe to one of our data centers, that data traffic is encrypted. So if you were to cut that traffic off midstream, you're going to get nothing but junk, because once you're connected, anything outside of receiving it inside the data center transmits nothing. So that's one of the security breaches that we have in place. I would also tell you, from a reference perspective, currently we have at Tyler, I won't say nothing's ever going to happen. It'd be not wise to say that, because you never really know what can happen. The only thing you can do is plan and prepare yourself for that. We've been in the hosting business now going on 10 years. We have roughly about 3,600 customers that use us every single day for a hosting environment, some in a SaaS world, some for disaster recovery, and some for e-service filings in courts, municipal courts throughout the country. So that's about 1.6 million users every day that are using Tyler for a hosted solution. And to this point, we haven't had any data breaches, and we've had your peers. We only work in local government, municipal government. So very experienced in having a secure footprint that technologists can look at, that we've actually been audited on, that we need to be, so that it's a sound, secure solution. This isn't a Band-Aid approach where we're kind of putting a little piece together. We spent millions of dollars, and it is not an association by which that if we decide we need to have new infrastructure next year or the year after, that we're going to come after the city to fund that. So you're not part of an association, and us maintaining that level of performance that we guarantee in the contract is on our dime to do so. And I would clarify one point here, is that as we were talking about the hosted solution versus the licenses that you're going to own, the city is going to own those. So you are going into a subscription service from a hosting perspective. Tyler's going to take responsibility for that. But for the Eden software that you currently own, we are crediting you those dollars for those pieces of software that you own. For additional software, complementary applications that you're currently not utilizing, there is a discounted license fee for, so there are licensed dollars there. But the tangible, that's a perpetual license. So if you decide at 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, you know what, this hosting solution is not for us anymore, we're going to buy some servers and put it here, you're not going to be looking at an additional capital expense to purchase the software. So the software is resident here, perpetual, and then the hosting is the hosting. That is not the case with some of our other hosting customers, but as an existing customer and already owning the licenses, Diana is absolutely correct. You're going into a subscription service, and that hosting is a subscription. But I just want to clarify that perpetual license is ongoing and it's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Lane, for those assurances. I really appreciate your comments. Can on just my last point, Mr. Tanaka perhaps address contractually what, if anything, in the contract deals with a data breach type of situation, or does that just fall under the negligence limitation on liability?
Well, it could fall under both. As Diane said, there are representations in the contract regarding their security, what they're doing. That could possibly, if that were a breach, it could be a breach of contract. It could also be a potential simple negligence or breach of a federal law or something like that, state law. Right now, the limitation for any of those is just the amounts paid that we paid for the SAS fees. So it could be a small amount, depending on whether that's a yearly or a total or a monthly basis. That's one of the things we'll be talking about. But again, it's a matter of risk management and pricing, and so that's the discussion that we're going to have.
Councilmember Winterstein?
Thank you. Diane, you were really prepared. That was a very comprehensive and thorough presentation. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Well, let's not let the vendor get too far away.
Okay. You and I go.
So I see, so this license, 25 concurrent users.
Yes.
I mean, how confident, I mean, that, is that right? Is that high, that low? I mean, 25, I mean, I saw new functionality that you expect are going to draw more employees to increase their productivity and gain other efficiencies within the city. 25 seems low to me.
So we had a lot of conversations with the Tyler representatives on this because I was exactly asking the same questions you were. So I said, so for instance, it's payroll day, it's timesheet day, and now we have 250 people accessing our payroll system on that particular day for that 15-minute period of time. What happens? And they indicated that what they're really looking for is the high-end users that are in the system every single day, that are using it a couple of hours a day. So these people that are in and out of the system really isn't counted against our 25 concurrent users. So let's say, and right now we very rarely, if ever, hit that 25 concurrent users. So let's say we are very, very successful and we have 100 people in the system every day. For each additional user's license, it's $1,000 a year. Is that correct? So as we get there, but you know, if we have a lot of people using our utility billing self-service, that's not that doesn't really count under our user license. Did I describe it?
Yes,
let
me just clarify.
You can probably explain it better.
From a hosting perspective, what we care about is making sure that our data center is equipped to handle the traffic that the market is bringing to us. So across all of our users, we want to make sure that it's accounted for. So we prepare for spikes and valleys and all of that. But as we do our audits, which don't happen frequently, if we look over the course of a 12-month period and you have a 25 concurrent user license and you're averaging 75 users, well, you really have a much higher usage. That doesn't take into consideration spikes. These are people that are in the system every single day using the system, power users. If that were the case, we'd probably make a proactive phone call and say, we'd like to have a discussion with you about the licensing because over the last 12-month period, 6-month period, whatever the interval is, we've noticed that you're a lot higher than 25, so we've under-configured that. We probably won't be there from an audit perspective or from a usability perspective well into the implementation, probably after you're live on all phases, before all users are in the system, before we would get there.
So is there an employee self-service component to this for
Yes.
time entry, and do they count as well?
No.
Okay, I think that's what Diane was saying.
It's a big saver. So we're not onerous from the standpoint of licensing. So there are some companies out there that license, and if you are a financial user and a payroll user and a utility billing user, you count as 3 users. But in the Munis system, if you're a payroll user, finance user, utility user, that's 1 license. So there's a difference on schemes, on ways that user licenses can drive a business model. We're not in a position where we really need to do that, and our self-service is separate. We kind of look at that as we need to have access to the system. There is some traffic there, but we're not monitoring a user.
So 25 regular power users seems right at this moment. So I'll have another question for you in a moment. Diane, so a 3-year, how long is this implementation? It's spread over 2.5 years?
Between 2.5 years.
Yeah, so that's a long time for you to be distracted, right? I mean, this is a pretty, yeah, and you've been through system implementations before?
Yes.
Okay. No, so one of the things in your presentation I was looking for, and you mentioned a lot of things, but I didn't see any kind of category about where we're going to realize cost savings due to the uptake of this system over our kind of existing cost model in some way, somewhere. I didn't see anything like that called out.
To some degree, because of how we currently do our business process, I think what it is cost avoidance versus cost savings. Because right now, you know, we would have cost avoidance, and if we did more electronic, we wouldn't have to have additional facilities for paper storage. If we continue to grow in utilities, for instance, instead of having to add an additional utility accountant 2 years from now or even a year from now, because we'll have more people being self-served, then we have that cost avoidance of additional staff. In the departments, as we become more efficient, instead of everybody keeping their own spreadsheet on their financial information, they'll be able to use the system, thereby freeing up their time to do more high-level work. So it's more of a cost avoidance versus a cost savings.
Okay. Wasn't there an element about the like the year-to-year maintenance we're paying now on the Eden system?
That piece actually there, yes, you're correct. Under Eden versus Munis for the like product like maintenance, there was actually a savings of approximately $10,000 a year by simply going to Munis.
Okay. So a little bit about so I know we have fragmented systems today, and I saw in the implementation proposal some data conversion. Well, you know, what are your plans? Financially, to tell me just more about what we're gonna have after data conversion. Once you go to this new system, and if people are used to retrieving something from an old way and it's no longer available, so that can cause some real issues. So how many years back, and what are your plans for data conversion?
So for the actual general ledger financial information, we will continue to have access to the Eden system, particularly for those people that are what I would call the power users. We currently have around 14 years worth of data. In working through the agreement with Munis, we will be moving current year information plus 2 years. Correct? So the new system will have that that data conversion. We are also looking, one of the most important pieces is our chart of accounts, and what we've come to recognize that our current scheme, we want to expand the number of options available. So that'll be a big change for the organization because we're just simply adding more numbers behind a decimal. But that'll allow us to be more creative in doing reports. You know, for instance, in the development services, one of the things that they currently do is they do expedited review. Right now, we really don't have the functionality and the ability, besides some spreadsheets and invoicing, to track that data and information to find out what's part of a normal land use development process versus when we contract for an expedited review. So we're looking at that functionality to have the system drive the data versus the system driving us.
So with the new chart of accounts and just maybe a couple years of history, and what would this council see? How, or will it see any? Will there be any anything that we're in the financial reporting that we already do, or within the budget and the forecasting that we do? How will we see or be impacted by any of that?
I think what you will see is you'll be seeing us be able to be more responsive to your information and your requests. And if there is pieces of data and information that you as a particular council member would like or request, then we have the ability to see what type of reporting, because it is a more robust system. If you were to say, these are the things that I would like to see, for instance, your own legislative budget. You know, you have a budget, and how many of you folks have ever looked at your legislative budget? If you have an interest to see how everything is working in the legislative departmental budget, we could then set you up with that functionality to look at it every day or whatever your desire is.
Yeah, right now we just look at the variance at the end of the year.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah. So, okay, I'm curious about the implementation and the team. Tell me a little bit about, because if there's risk involved with such implementations, I don't know anything about Tyler's, the staff that you bring, how big a staff is going to be here, what is your turnover and retention. I mean, that really has a what is their experience on doing municipalities of this size with this application? That'll have a big bearing on meeting the services outlined in this proposal.
So what I'll do is I'll speak a little bit to our side of the team. So currently we're having discussions on who the project manager should be. At this point in time, just because of her level of expertise, I am looking at Beth Ann Rowe, the Deputy Finance Director, as far as being the project manager. If she is the project manager, then what we would have to do is look at backstopping her, because in working with Tyler, they're indicating that we need to have somebody available 2 to 3 days a week. And so we have a body of work that would continue to be needs to be done. It's just simply not work we can stop doing. So we would look at backfilling that resource. And then what will happen is in each of the modules, in each of the sections, we would identify what we call subject matter experts. So whether it's accounts payable, whether it's contract management, we would then pull resources in from the city for those people to get the education and training. And for instance, if it's accounts payable, it would be Sophie Wong out of my department. If it was contracts, it would be Mary Lorna Mead, our risk manager. So on our side, we would identify the subject matter experts who would then have the responsibility in working with the implementer to help design the system, with the Deputy Finance Director, being the umbrella and oversight, making sure that it continues to meet state law, that it'll pass the requirements of our audit, and then also give us better information. So with regards to the actual implementation side, I would defer to Bill.
Before you say that, so you don't expect to see any other requests for new headcount as part of this implementation?
We will be looking at temporary positions to assist in the backfill, but long term, we're not looking at adding additional resources. So if we have, and we've had some conversations, do we bring in a fiscal specialist? Like when we get to utility billing, right now we only have one person that does our utility billing. So what we would need to do is, when that person is working on that component of the project, we would have to backstop her potentially with a part-time person. So we're still working out that, but that's contained within our overall dollar amount.
Okay, so that's in your forecasting
Yes.
budget? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And
yes. Okay. From an implementation perspective, within the Munis product, within Tyler, we have the implementation division is currently comprised of about 245 professionals that do implementation: project managers, subject matter experts, end user trainers. And so we've broken those up into regions. And so we have a Northeast region, a Southeast region, a Midwest region, and a West region. The West region is headquartered out of Tempe, Arizona. And so Scott Parks, who manages that implementation team, which is roughly about 77 people on his team, comprised of project managers and trainers, just like I mentioned earlier. They would be assigned to the project. So you'd have an overall project manager, and we develop our application, implement our application, and support our application by teams. So we would have a financial team, a payroll team, utility billing team, so that when you have a subject matter expert or a trainer that's working with you, they're expert in that particular area. Also, is that many times we have multiple phases going on in an implementation. So we could essentially have a financial phase and a payroll phase, different resources from Tyler, but working in unison in an overall project. We do follow the PMI methodology for implementation, which is the Project Management Institute. All of our project managers are going through the certification process, so they have to have at least 1,500 hours of practical experience in the field before they can sit for their PMP certification. We've actually invested in that. We don't just throw a name out. We actually subscribe to it and pay into it. So our annual expenditure is up over $200,000 a year just through the certification process, and making sure that our project managers can facilitate and implement according to the PMI methodology, which we really feel as though reduces the level of risk that you have, and sign off and expectations with the city
so that you know where you are and whether or not you're an executive sponsor, whether or not you're an end user, you're going to be able to see exactly where you are on the project and know what the expectation level is. Every one of these people that are on the West Coast team, this is what they do every day. So we do not have a different vertical market. So when we implement Munis, we work with cities, counties, towns, and schools. So they are not working in manufacturing, they're not working in warehousing, they're not working in medical. They only work in what you do every day. And those are the only customers that they're exposed to. And the only product that they're exposed to is the Munis product that we're talking about.
All right. All right, thank you. Hey, I have one last question, Diane.
I was just going to add, part of it was in doing our due diligence, as I indicated earlier. San Marcos is really going through a current implementation. So we're checking in with them once a month. How's the implementation going? What are your lessons learned? What are the lessons that we can learn? Mason County just did an implementation. We checked in with them and Bainbridge Island. And then anecdotally, some email traffic came from another city that was doing an implementation on Munis, unsolicited, because we were in and it basically said the implementation was going better than they had anticipated. In fact, it was going good.
Yeah, so actually, I'll jump to that. Was going to be my last comment. I mean, I was very pleased to hear both at committee and again tonight. I think what you and your team did in prior to even making your decision and to visit other existing customers of theirs and talk to them about their implementation and what worked and what didn't. To get that, I think you called it the search. You had up there, and that's a pretty I'm really was glad to see that level of diligence, that opportunity. There's nothing better than a customer testimony, and they have no reason to other than to just tell you the way it is. So if you based your decision largely upon that, it gives me a much greater feeling of satisfaction that we're going in the right direction. So I appreciate that very much. And then the last question that I did have is, so we heard about a lot of these modules and systems are being implemented, but what else? So what else is the city still going to be running outside of? I know police has their systems. But what outside? And I think I understand that Public Works Operations are still going to run some of their own systems. And what is or at least maybe a work order management or something like that? What are our plans for actually folding all of that into this Munis system?
So as you indicated, the software in the police department we will not be absorbing it. If there is an interface needed, we will do that. Another one is we currently have Trackit for our land use and permitting. At this point in time, the Munis has a similar product, but at this point in time, we did not do enough research and analysis to determine whether we should stay with our current vendor or whether we should opt in, and that would be for a future phase 5 or 6. Another one that will be an interface would be our Parks and Rec. We are currently part of the eGov coalition, and though they are looking at it moving from a current software called Class to potentially to another software called Active. And so because they have, there is a coalition of cities, for us to kind of bring in the Munis product did not make a good business decision. With regards to our own public works operation, we know that in certain circumstances, they will be using functionality in our system. We believe that over time they will see the merits of our system, and we anticipate there will be things that they will be using in the system versus in their current customization system. So for instance, if I'm a department, the origination of just about doing anything is a contract. And all contracts and approvals will flow through the Munis system, where right now it is a manual system. So we realize and we believe that once we can show that this functionality exists and there is better information, then we could reduce our reliance on our customization of our existing software. There is like our GIS system, our Civic Plus system, and I'm trying to remember, I think.
But I guess the real question is simply
courts. Their court system is part of a statewide system.
Okay. But so if some of these other systems and people migrate over to Munis, what have you, we may see some increase in use, but at the kind of above and beyond that 25 we talked about earlier. But right now, you're not planning for any of that.
I would anticipate increased usage in the system once the system is up and running, because if you start at the initiation of any transaction, and typically that requires a contract, I would anticipate us seeing people in and out of the system as they're entering contracts, whereas right now, currently it's an entirely manual process. So once people become comfortable with, we don't hardly ever, we probably have active users at any given time of maybe 12 people. So we do have capacity within that user license as we bring on more people that find the value in the system.
All right, thank you.
Tola.
So, how long has the Munis SaaS software been around?
Approximately 10 years you've been providing the service?
We've been providing hosted solutions for about 10 years. The software itself was first developed in 1982. The first time we developed a product called Munis, and it's been in existence ever since, through multiple iterations of generation and technology. But one of the things we didn't talk about is that from an evergreen development perspective, our first customer who purchased the application in 1982, Westbrook, Maine, is still a customer today, and they've gone from a COBOL-based screen to an HTML5, and they haven't purchased the license again. They haven't had to convert data or anything along those lines. So they've realized a value of it, and that's also part of every Tyler customer's approach is to provide that level of technology and functionality each and every year.
So Tyler's been doing this for a while, and Munis has been around for a while. But the Munis SaaS software specifically was first rolled out when?
Us providing being a hosting environment, we've been doing that going on 10 years.
Okay.
So that is not a different license. So from the way you do general ledger, the way you do budgeting, just because you're in our SaaS environment doesn't mean the application's any different. It just means that we're your IT department, we're hosting it, we're managing it, we're making sure that it performs. That's really the extension of SaaS.
Okay. So Diane, my question for you is, when you talk to other municipalities that had implemented Munis SaaS, how many of them had completed the rollout?
Of the ones we've talked to, 3 of them are using SAS service, and interesting enough, one of Woodinville Water District, they have been doing hosted for many, many years, and then based upon their own internal review and assessment, they either are or going through the process of doing a subscription-based service. So they were another one that we've been kind of following what they've been doing and getting their feedback.
So you did talk to 3 customers that have completed implementation of the software.
Yes, and plus one that is in the current process.
Gotcha. Thank you. And the last question I have is, since you said Woodinville's already in it, I'll just ask, is there a financial records aspect to OPMA, and if so, how does this software deal with those issues as they come up?
So if I understand your question is, how do we deal with open public records request?
Correct. Do those affect financial records, and if so?
Quite honestly, the majority of the transactions that the city does is public records. You know, the exception is like Social Security numbers, individual voluntary benefits and deduction. There isn't really much in the way of what we do on a daily basis that is not subject to disclosure.
All right, thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Seeing none, are you ready to act on the motion? All those in favor of authorizing the mayor to enter into and execute the Munis contract with Tyler Technologies for the Munis ERP software application pending legal counsel review signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously. Moving now to item D under regular business, Agenda Bill 6856, Issaquah Highlands Shared Stormwater Agreement. That is coming back from the Infrastructure Committee. Councilmember Scher.
Thank you. I think it was Councilmember Milligan who made the request to drop the bill down, so I'd be happy to defer to her to explain the rationale.
Thank you, Josh. Yes, I had asked to bring this down because we had discussed this in committee, and I had some questions, and the way that I understood the answers during our committee is different than the way that I understand them now, and I wanted to go back to revisit the issues that I had in questions, and part of that was the indemnification clause and the way that it's written in there. And so I hope that I will bring some more expertise to that conversation when we bring it back to the committee. Perhaps even, we didn't have a representative from the IHCA at our last meeting, so I could not adequately convey their interests. And perhaps we can have somebody at this next committee meeting so we can clear those questions up on the spot. And I think it'll be a very quick work. So I just request it come back down to the committee so we can take care of that work at that level. What does the motion look like, though, in that case? I move that we bring the Agenda Bill 6856, Issaquah Highlands Shared Stormwater Agreement, back to the Infrastructure Committee meeting of the month of October. Right?
Second.
Thank you.
Just, I think, did I hear that the Infrastructure Committee meeting was tomorrow?
Is it appropriate to comment in the midst of a pending motion on that question?
Help me.
It's been moved and seconded.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Scher.
There is a meeting tomorrow. The intent, I believe, was not to bring it back to tomorrow. That agenda's already been set and announced. That, however, was supposed to have been the August Infrastructure Committee meeting. It got moved to September 3rd because of unforeseen circumstances. We are technically scheduled to have an Infrastructure Committee meeting on September 18th.
Okay.
It's unknown at this time whether we will need to have a Infrastructure Committee meeting on September 18th. If this is the only bill, then I suppose it could be. If not, it could go to October. I don't know what everybody wants to do. I'm just pointing out the dates. But September 18th would technically be the September Infrastructure Committee meeting. We will presumably also have one in October, although right now I think there's a budget session that conflicts with that. So all these dates are really in flux. So I guess I commend to you, Nina, when would you like this to come back, and we'll try to make it work, would be my
How about
comment as the chair of that committee.
the next scheduled meeting following tomorrow's? Is that adequate?
So, I believe you're amending the motion to bring this back to the September 18th Infrastructure Committee meeting and to return to the council at our October 6th council meeting. Have we got that right? Would you restate your motion?
Thank you. I move that we take Agenda Bill 6856, Issaquah Highlands Shared Stormwater Agreement, move it to the Infrastructure Committee, refer it to the Infrastructure Committee meeting of September 18th to return to the council meeting on October 6th.
And so for the seconder,
Yes, I agree.
okay, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of moving Agenda Bill 6856 to the referring it to the September 18th Council Infrastructure Committee, returning to the full council with a recommendation at the August 6th council meeting, October 6th. Council, it's been a long night.
Yes.
Signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, that carries unanimously. That completes our business items. Is there anything for good of the order this evening? Councilmember Scheer.
Thank you. I did have one item. So the Eastside Transportation Partnership is going to meet on Friday, September 12th. I did receive information that there is a regional transportation summit that has been put together primarily by Mayor Ed Murray of Seattle and Councilmember Rasmussen of Seattle. And that happens to fall at exactly the same date and almost the same time as our ETP meeting. There will be some ETP members, including Councilmember Asher of Kirkland, who sits on the Regional Transit Committee, the RTC, who intend to appear at this summit. I'm still questionable because the summit is essentially 8:30 to I think 12 or 12:30, and I'm not sure honestly I can take that big a chunk out of my day in comparison to the hour and a half we usually meet for ETP. So if anyone else is interested in going, whether that be you, Mayor, or any other council members, it is going to be on September 12th at 8:30 in the morning, location TBD.
I've got
somewhere
that on my calendar. I haven't really decided which one I'm going to yet or not. Anything else for good of the order? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 9:41.